The ending of the War of the Rings, as well as the destruction of the One Ring, created a whole new era in Middle-earth. The biggest threat had been eliminated and the Age of Man had started. From this point on, elves, dwarves, orcs, and all the magical beings began to fade away to make room for the race of man. But what happened to Mordor? What happened to tens of thousands of orcs that survived Sauron's death? Let's find out. Sauron was killed at the end of War of the Rings. However, the fate of his goblins and orcs following his death was never revealed in Lord of Rings. In this video, we'll address those topics for you. To begin, we must state that goblins and orcs are nearly synonyms in Middle-earth, making it easy for you to follow along. They are shown as distinctly separate creatures in some legends, but they are depicted as the same in others. We'll start by explaining a few facts about orcs, which will help you to fully grasp what happened after War of the Rings and Sauron's fall. The Dark Lord's primary foot troops were orcs, who were also the weakest. Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, formed them before the First Age to help him and his descendants in their attempt to rule Middle-earth. Melkor kidnapped and tortured certain elves, transforming them into first orcs until Aurum discovered them in Cuiviénen. Many orcs, together with Maer and vile Melkor servants, survived in Melkor's vast underground fortresses of Autumno and Angband's deep caves, chambers, pits, and tunnels. They expanded and finally spread throughout Middle-earth. The dwarves were the first to discover them, and they revealed them to Sindar's High King, King Thingol, driving him to obtain weapons for the very first time. For more than a millennium, the orcs were only a minor worry, but as Melkor came with Silmarils, he ended up taking entire command of them and shortly discharged them to Beleriand. Denethor, the lightly armed king of Lyquendi, was murdered by the newly organized orcs, but Thingol and allied forces eventually defeated them. Under Círdan's direction, they attacked the Fellas Havens and the battle continued until the sudden appearance of the Noldor. The Sindar lost a lot of people to the orcs, and that scared them so much that Queen of Doriath, Melian, made a powerful spell to protect her land. Lyquendi, who took the most damage in the war, hid in Osiriand or took shelter in Doriath. The orcs in Tolkien's books were mean, sadistic, dark, violent, and hostile to everyone and everything, especially to the peaceful and affluent people who lived there. They were humanoid in form and small in stature. Most of them were small and slender, but they were also flat-nosed, broad, dark, bow-legged, and bow-tied. They had slanted eyes, wide mouths, and long arms with dark skin. If Sam and Frodo were able to hide in Mordor as orcs, they must have been taller than hobbits. Tolkien says that one big orc chieftain was almost man-high. They looked like humans, but they had pointed ears, sharp teeth, and dirty skin. Almost all of the races found them disgusting because of how they looked. When the elves woke up, Melkor became the first person to hear about it. His evil spirits began to spread doubt about the Valar soon after. It is said that most of the elves were being taken by Ryder. Elves eventually assumed that these were transported to Autumno and tormented before being transformed into orcs. It took 587 years for the battles of Beleriand to go on for a long time. Morgoth made a lot of orcs in Angband to fight in the First Age. It was at the Battle for the Lemoth that they first appeared. The Noldor were able to defeat them there. Orcs were sent to fight House of Fanar when they came back to Middle-earth. Orcs were larger than exiles, yet they couldn't stand up to the Oldor's might and anger. They easily and quickly lost. Because he couldn't destroy Morgoth alone, Fëanor was killed. The Dark Lord allowed the orcs to reproduce, allowing the Dark Lord to fulfill his duty and slay them. Orcs were dispatched to battle the House of Fingolfin when they arrived in Middle-earth a long time later. the Orcs were completely annihilated at the Battle of Lamoth. After being beaten in the Dagor Aglareb and a brief attack on Hithlum, the Orcs recovered their strength and fought in huge numbers again in the Nirnaeth Arnoedian and the Dagor Bragolok, when they and their master achieved devastating victories against the world's free people. Except for a handful, they were all slaughtered in War and escaped to the Angmar and Grey Mountains. Sauron appeared in Middle-earth in the year 1000, establishing Mordor as his realm and laying the framework for Barad-dûr. The Orcs were the major host of Sauron's power during War of Elves. Despite the presence of a large number of Orcs, the Elves and Númenóreans were victorious because to their combined might and numbers. Throughout Saruman's rule and until Sauron's defeat in the Third Age, Orcs constituted backbone of Mordor's and Isengard's army. They were devastated at Sauron's death and rushed to the Black Gate, where they were slaughtered nearly to the very last Orc by men of West in aftermath of the Great Fight. It was genocide for the Orcs from Mordor, and only very few escaped, retreating to natural tunnels. However, in other regions of Middle-earth, like Misty Mountains, Orcs just weren't nearly as dependent on mighty Sauron, and most of them would have survived if they had not been slaughtered in the conflict around Erebor just at the end of Fourth Age. They reproduced similarly to the Ilúvatar children. Additionally, we note that they were bred by Morgoth, were industrialized in Mordor, and were self-governing and self-sustaining elsewhere. Morgoth and Sauron's wizardry directed and controlled Orcs' wills from outside rather than entirely from inside. Magic is a term used to describe the manipulation of energy, which was a part of this Vala and this Maya's identity as supernatural entities. When Sauron was eventually assassinated, we saw his visible works crumble as the curses tying Orcs to his evil will and direction lost their strength, leaving the Orcs afraid and without a desire to live. However, the situation would not have been irreversible for Orcs living the farthest from Mordor, such as those dwelling north of Misty Mountains. Orcs were likely to be killed by dwarves and humans in the south, and elves from north as a deliberate policy in the early years of Fourth Age. In less than a generation of men, this mass killing would have been stopped and the remaining Orcs would have been abandoned in the most isolated mountains, where they could live underground without having to deal with anyone else. In Tolkien's book, King Aragorn handed the Orcs areas near Lake Nirn in south of Mordor as their home. After that, he took most of Khand and Harad, as well as the land near Lake Rhûn, and put them in the new kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. Aragorn took the Orcs out of Gorgoroth, which Sauron made so polluted that it was almost uninhabitable, other places that could be held by man. He kept them in South Mordor near Lake Nirn. It was hard for Tolkien to describe why there aren't Orcs, Hobbits, Elves, or Dwarves here today, because he made it seem like Middle-earth was a real place. Their strength rose, then they went away as men got more strong. They gradually settled over Middle-earth. The kingship of Aragorn is a sign that the old order of many different races is over, and humans now rule the world. As a result, Orcs were only allowed to live in certain areas and not spread across the world. Tolkien loved to imagine that the Orcs created all the techniques for simultaneously murdering large numbers of humans. Orcs were made by Morgoth, not Sauron. Sauron made them evil during years the trees lived. During the First Age, Morgoth lost all of his powers in Arda. He was banished from the earth at the end of First Age, so the fall of Sauron had no impact on them in terms of overall survival. After Morgoth fell, Sauron was just not active for a long time and couldn't control the Dark Lord's forces. As recently as year TA 2950, Gorbag and Shagrat talked about these events in the Two Towers. These are the things that they talked about. No, there isn't much reason to think that the post-Sauron era will be different from old days. As a result, the orcs would likely turn to banditry instead of being a well-organized group, and other species would likely kill them off. So here's my question for today. If you were a surviving orc who has been serving Sauron for thousands of years and were given the choice between fighting in his name or hiding, would you choose to fight in his name or hide in a dark hole somewhere in a mountain or a cave for the rest of your life? Today's question is a little silly, but let's explore in the comment section below. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to view this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video and please remember to like and subscribe. I wish you all a wonderful day.